The government takes everything we make. They're power hungry and malicious. Their economics are fictitious.
So good. Did you know in the last 48 hours, Doge has canceled $182 million worth of contracts?
Wow. That's it?
Hey, it's a start.
I know.
I'll take it.
I mean, if they're doing that every day, it's $1 billion a week.
I'll take it.
You know?
I'll take it.
Hey, y'all, welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Good to be with you. I am all for tariffs. I mean, like, you come into my house, I'm going to tariff you off like nobody else. You know what I'm saying?
Your kids are like, Dad, no.
Like, you try to import stuff into my house, I got a solution for it.
Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what they...
I'm pro-tariff like Trump.
How is it in the Shannon household?
We like free trade.
You're a free trade family.
We're a free trade family.
So they're mercantilists?
Yeah, we're free trade.
No,
if you
free trade?
I'm all about using tariffs.
Okay, explain.
Let me just put it that way. In my house.
You have put it
in
that
my
way
house
several times.
So if I come to your house, you're taxing me?
It
doesn't sound very hospitable.
The problem is if you come to my house with a gun, well, then I'm going to, you know what I'm saying?
I see what you're doing here. I see what you're doing.
I got 10 acres of property I can dig you in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and my family, we're just straight Marxists.
Yeah?
I own everything.
Yeah.
In your family?
Yes. It's a very collectivist situation.
I like to think about my family as like the garden, right? They mature into ownership, you know?
Okay, all right.
It's a little more free.
We just confused our listenership there.
The show's about tariffs, I think.
Yeah, I think you got to stick around now at this point.
The mission of Armored Republic is to honor Christ by equipping free men with tools of liberty necessary to preserve God-given rights. In the Armored Republic, they
don't like tariffs.
They don't. I'm very sure that David Reese does not like tariffs. There is no king but Christ in the Armored Republic. We're free craftsmen. Body armor is a tool of liberty. We create tools of liberty. Free men must remain ever vigilant against tyranny wherever it appears. God has given us the tools of liberty needed to defend the rights he bestowed upon us. Armored Republic is honored to offer you those tools, so visit them at ar500armor.com. That's the letters AR, the number 500, and then the word armor.com. Is your website user-friendly, fast, and cohesive? Does your brand clearly communicate who you are and what you have to offer? Have you turned off your notifications, Gabe? Whether you're just getting your business started or you've been around the block, Mad Bear Creative can help with all your design needs, from brand identity and web design to SEO and marketing materials. As a husband and wife team, Julio and Roslyn are excited to partner with other small but mighty business owners to capture attention, drive engagement, and unlock growth for your business. Visit madbear.io to sign up for a free consultation, madbear.io, and discover how Mad Bear can help you build your legacy today.
One of these.
You want to go to war? Because we could go to war. I'm for real.
One of these $182 million worth of contracts was a $168,000 contract for an Anthony Fauci exhibit at NIH Museum. First of all, I mean, NIH Museum?
Right.
We have a museum for NIH?
Can I get an exhibit?
Yeah, for real.
They trying to get more money. They're like, give us more money if we do
an exhibit.
And they had an Anthony Fauci exhibit. Not only do we have an NIH museum, but then
that's okay. They can do that. I just don't want to be the one paying for it.
Yeah. No.
Hey, if they were some other, like, just if y'all want to do that over there without my money, that's fine.
Someone else wants to freely give their money to build that exhibit.
Man.
Now that I will put a tariff on.
So
a 95% tariff
on Anthony Fauci exhibits
and his flus.
You know, it's amazing what brings out the mercantilism in everybody. Put a tariff on that one.
Since we playing that game.
So everyone's talking about tariffs this last week and a half.
Yeah.
And Trump actually had brought up tariffs in his.
He's been talking about this
for a long
time. He says, if I'm elected, I'm doing tariffs.
And he even in his first administration initiated a lot of tariffs.
Yeah.
And actually, funny enough, Biden kept all those tariffs and even raised some of the tariffs that he had instituted.
That's just how we've been operating.
It was interesting that, like, when I was reading about this, that there was nary a peep about the Biden tariffs.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, like, where was all the outrage? Where was all the, like...
Because Biden raised some of Trump's tariffs.
Yeah.
Who's been... Is it mostly been conservatives that have been outraged about it, or is it Democrats? Because I haven't seen many Democrats talk about Trump's tariffs.
It's been Both.
Okay.
But there's actually relatively, at least what I'm reading is there's bipartisan support and bipartisan criticism for different reasons.
Now we know we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. When the Republicans and Democrats are
get
agreeing,
together, it's like you're the one being eaten. Let's just talk about that.
But no, it's true. And although Biden's tariffs were primarily for green energy stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was his. That was the way he was doing it. He was.
Well, that makes sense.
He was trying to protect American green energy.
Yeah.
And so he was.
And so you have to make it expensive.
He was putting tariffs on Chinese green energy.
Yeah.
In order to try to incentivize more American.
Yeah.
Energy stuff. Windmills and solar farms that don't work apparently.
Yeah, we're gonna look back on the whole windmill thing as just a massive horse laughter. I mean, it like. I remember meeting with Avista, our big utility company here in the area, all the way up through Washington.
Yep.
And their government communicator, who we know, was showing me all the data. And what's interesting about us up here in the Northwest is we actually have a lot of
wind.
No, we have a lot of water.
Oh yeah,
water hydro energy producing.
That's right.
And so it's super cheap. That's one of the cheaper energy producing kind of facilities.
Right.
And he was showing me, cost per kilowatt is like 18 cents per kilowatt for wind turbines.
Yeah.
Cost per hydro is like 2 cents.
Yeah.
So
18 cents to 2 cents.
Right.
How much is that? That's like 400% or something.
So isn't it true though? The reason it's so low is because of how efficient it is to operate.
You build a dam, and water that you don't have to push through goes through by itself.
So at this constant rate.
So then,
you can choke and control it.
Yeah, right.
Why wouldn't you double that and then say, why don't we take? It's the same way of saying, hey, horses would be a good idea to have for people to travel. So we should make roads that horses and paddy wagons can get on.
Yeah.
Because of the fish.
That's actually part
obviously
of the.
you hate fish.
Yeah.
And you hate Indians.
Yes.
I mean, sorry, Native
Whoa,
Americans.
I am one, partially.
And
You're Native. I'm a Native American.
Yeah.
I was born here.
Yeah.
Native
but
American.
clearly you have a lot I hate in your heart.
I do.
That's why you want to build more hydroelectric.
I hate things that are inefficient.
Yeah.
So let's give a little context around this and everything. So Trump last week tweeted this out. So Mexico and Canada have kind of been in the news with our discussions on tariffs. So here's what Trump tweeted out last week that really got the ball rolling.
Today, I have implemented a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, 10% on Canadian energy, and a 10% additional tariff on China. This was done through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, because of the major threat of illegal aliens and deadly drugs killing our citizens, including fentanyl. We need to protect Americans, and it is my duty as president to ensure the safety of all. I made a promise on my campaign to stop the flood of illegal aliens and drugs from pouring across our borders, and Americans overwhelmingly voted in favor of it.
So here's the IEEPA is International Emergency.
There's always
Economic
an act.
Powers
Isn't
Act.
there?
I know.
There's always something
Gives
to
the
get more
president
power.
of the United States the authority to regulate international economic transactions, so international, in response to a national emergency.
Yeah.
This sounds like COVID.
Right. Well, yeah. Although illegal immigrants and fentanyl is more real than COVID.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is quite different.
The IEEPA is basically used to protect the country's national security, foreign policy, and economy.
Right.
So
So he does this, and initially, the response from Canada and Mexico is like, we gonna go.
Yeah, kick rocks.
So Trudeau.
so Trump ties both his hands behind his back and be like, all right, let's go then. I'll beat you with my hands behind my back.
So Trudeau gets on his little bully pulpit.
Yeah.
And this is what he says.
Next tweet. Okay.
I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
That's like Knox, his house, putting tariffs of $100 on me or something like that. It's not very much. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, is it not?
$2 billion, $100 billion.
Well, I think
$200 billion for American economy. That's nothing.
Well, he's at least he's talking big. I mean, even
No,
just
he's not. My point is, he's throwing money around. That's actually not big for America's economy.
but it's big for Canadians.
Yeah.
If he felt like it'd be enough for them to buy time to find some alternatives.
Yeah, I don't know. He at least thinks he's talking big.
I mean, he's Fidel Castro's son, so you can think.
Okay. Oh, really? That's
Gabe.
What is this show about exactly?
Community notes. Community notes.
Okay. So, but the Mexican president actually initially came out swinging too.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, "Oh yeah,
let's go.
Come on,
So she kind of did the same thing.
She
Trudeau
did a very different,
Right.
similar thing. Initially, her initial response was, "You can't do this," and you don't know what you're talking about. Well, a few hours later, Trump tweets this out. I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period during which we'll have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in these negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries.
That was within like an hour?
Yeah, a little while later. And just a little while after that, next one, Canada has agreed to ensure we have a secure northern border and to finally end the deadly scourge of drugs like fentanyl that have been pouring into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans while destroying their families and communities all across our country. Canada will implement their $13 billion border plan. As per Prime Minister Trudeau, will be, quote, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhance coordination with our American partners, and increase resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I've also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. As president, it is my responsibility to ensure the safety of all Americans, and I'm doing just that. I'm very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured fairness for all.
That's funny.
We're going to give y'all a second to think about if this is a good idea for y'all.
And to make sure your troops are going to get to the border. We want to make sure you're going to take action now. The $1.3 billion thing, I heard that was something that was voted in like 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
And they never did anything about it. They never did anything about it. So they had that money there.
So Trump says tariffs. They both initially go out and they'll be like, no, you can't. And then a few hours later, they're like
$5.
They're like, okay, where do you want the troops?
Yeah.
And Trump says, okay, you got 30 days
to show me.
Let's see it. Let's see it, and then let's see if we can work out a final deal.
Something I just noticed with this that's really interesting. Most of the time, when you see government intervention with tariffs, it's usually to protect a particular institution or company or business, certain businesses. This is actually citizen based.
Okay, what do you mean?
So he's trying to stop drugs from flowing to the country that kill American citizens and illegal aliens from entering America, also stealing from American citizens as well.
Right.
Usually it's to stop other competing companies from knocking out other companies in America that could potentially be flourishing.
Right.
This isn't that particular fight.
Right.
This is actually a fight over the American citizens being protected.
From illegal immigrants
and
gangs and drugs.
Right. Yeah. And which is really interesting because I'm not used to seeing tariffs particularly used in this manner. Right. And so this is really, it's kind of a stark contrast because it's not for a particular institution to flourish.
Right. Just the people.
Just the people.
Right.
Because what he's ultimately saying is, you guys are doing a poor job of governing your own countries.
Right.
To the point that we are bleeding in your crimes. We are bleeding in your society, and we are doing our best to try and stop it. You guys are not. You have been taking advantage of our kindness or weakness. We're really not as weak as you think, and I'm going to show you we're not as weak as you think by putting these tariffs on you. Let's see who can hold out. right? Like he's calling a bluff.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice that there's not, usually it's like, okay, Silicon Valley needs you to put a tariff on these folks over here.
Right.
Or it's usually how it
We're going to
works.
put tariffs on steel and aluminum because we want American steel.
T-shirt manufacturers need tariffs on France because they make cheaper T-shirts and they're going to put them out of business.
Yeah, it's picking winners and losers. It's selective preference.
This is not exactly that.
Right.
This is different.
Yeah.
This is different. And
so this is tariffs as sort of bargaining chip, tariffs as a penalty, tariffs as playing chicken.
That actually could make both countries better.
Yeah.
Right. Now China might be a little bit different.
Right.
But I think between Canada, Mexico, and China, the imports that we get make about 43% of our imports.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
Between all three of those.
Between all three of those together.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And apparently all the fentanyl is made in China. So literally, it's all made in China, and then it's shipped to Canada and Mexico.
Yes.
And that's how it comes in.
Wow.
So that's why China's in the mix. It's in the mix because China makes all the fentanyl, and then it streams in through the northern and southern borders.
But what he's doing is forcing them to actually govern their own borders well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually really important.
Yeah. This is, and I mean, the biblical name for this is love.
Love your
Tariffs
neighbor.
are love.
Love your neighbor.
I don't like the way those are tied together, Pastor.
Are you saying Trump is loving Canada and Mexico by doing this?
He's making our neighbors better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, normally I've thought about tariffs. I
don't like it. I don't like it. You know what though? You know what I feel like? This is a moment in Judges.
I'm trying to reach out to the Gospel Coalition people.
Yeah. This is gospel centered, folks. He's loving his neighbors by putting tariffs on them, forcing them to govern their own borders.
Forcing them to uphold law and order.
Yes.
Yes. It's like that's actually.
Yeah, I think, what is it, $1 billion that Mexico is actually going to use to enforce their borders as well.
$1 billion?
Yes.
They have?
In pesos, Gabe, in pesos.
$1 billion pesos.
Okay. What, I guess normally when I've thought about tariffs, kind of to your point a little bit, Knox, is let's say China's using slave labor to, I don't know, make shoes or something. And that defeats our ability to make shoes here in the U.S., but because they're kind of cheating the system and in a sinful way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I might slap a tariff on China because, well, you're cheating, and it's taking away from our ability or whatever, kind of thing. But we do that. That actually happens.
Right. Yeah. That does happen.
That's kind of the common argument I hear is they're cheating, so we need to put tariffs on them to even the playing field for our economy.
How are they cheating?
Well,
by using slave labor, not paying any labor, basically.
I mean, if they have the Uyghurs in China in
making shoes
work camps, basically slaves.
Mm-hmm.
There's no labor cost to make those shoes.
Making stuff and then putting that on the market, it's being made for far under market price, and we see that as immoral, and we want to discourage that. Tariffs could be used. One argument would be we slap tariffs on that because we believe that you're using immoral means to then undercut prices.
So what we want to do is disincentivize our people. We want to make sure that our people have to pay more and hurt our people ultimately as much as we are theirs.
Well, no, it's the idea.
Because it doesn't just end there.
No, that's not the argument. It's
no, but I'm saying that's how it works out.
Yeah.
Well, it's like if there's if you know that there's a supply of people are stealing stuff and then bringing it to market. If the government knows we don't know where you're stealing it, we can't prove it, but we know you're stealing it. The government says we're slapping a tax on that because we want to discourage that being brought to market. We want to discourage people from buying that
behavior
because we want to discourage that behavior. That's what Gabe's getting at.
Yeah.
That's just one of the arguments for using a tariff.
And that's the common way I've heard of tariffs being used.
Well, I think that's one of the ways it's argued for.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that's not how it's actually been commonly used.
Okay.
What it's actually commonly used to do is actually, I think it's a protectionist
It's always been, yeah.
And so there's
protect our steel, like we were mentioning earlier.
It's been this goes back to the founding of our country. Like one of the very first acts passed in 1789 is a sugar tariff.
Yeah.
Like we've been tariffing sugar for 250 years.
Wow.
And my understanding is that we still have a tariff on sugar.
And we've had some very hard times because of that.
And the whole point of it was that we wanted to give basically we wanted to give a leg up to American sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in the down in the Bahamas,
Yeah.
they can make sugar there, not because they're using slave labor per se, but because the climate there is just perfect for sugar.
It grows like weeds down there.
It grows like weeds down there,
yeah.
and they can produce it without even trying. And so they can ship it to market for way less than it costs us to make sugar in America.
Yeah.
And so you would put other companies that try to make sugar in America out of business.
Exactly. So you have tariffs as policy.
Yep.
Like standing policy as protectionist policy, like that.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Which I agree. I think is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Then you have tariffs as penalties, which I think there's an argument for tariff for penalties for letting fentanyl in our country, tariff as penalty for allowing illegal immigrants into our country, tariff as penalty for we know you're using slave labor to produce this, and we want to penalize that. We don't want, because you're not competing in a fair way. And then you have maybe tariffs, and it's sort of overlaps with that, is tariffs with just sort of playing chicken. Tariffs as a negotiating tool, because right now, so far, Trump's just using it as a bargaining chip. Now, presumably, he would have gone through with it. I mean, he's gone through with tariffs before.
Yeah, I think, though, if Trump is doing this, I think he's counting the cost. Part of what I said earlier, I think he's looking at him and saying, okay, if we really do have to enforce this tariff, how long are you going to be able to hold out? I think some of them are counting the cost and say, yeah, we wouldn't hold out long at all.
Right.
And so, therefore, this is a bad idea.
And that's what we've heard from our Canadian friends in particular.
Yeah,
they were like,
absolutely.
oh, no, if you guys do this, this is going to be terrible for us.
And I think the way that the government is cleaning up its mess right now and cleaning up its funding outside of America with cutting off USAID, USAID. I think I told you guys earlier, they got 10,000 employees around the world. They're trying to get it down to 300, less than 300 employees now.
Yes.
And so they're firing like,
yes, Yes, I love it.
Yeah, so that would make us stronger because we would have more of our own income and funds towards our society.
So we should probably pause real quick and just like define our terms real fast, because maybe some people are like, what in the heck is tariffs?
Right.
So a tariff is a tax.
Right.
Tariff is a tax on imports.
Yes.
And no matter how you slice it, every citizen's going to be affected by that tax at some level.
Hidden taxes for citizens.
So what it means, though, is that if you, as a private citizen or a company, want to buy a product, goods from another country
that has tariff,
if there's a tariff on that good, then or on that good from that country, then that's an additional tax on the cost. And you, the consumer, the American consumer or business company, you pay for it, which then means that whoever buys that end product pays for it.
Right.
So this is what Knox was getting at earlier, was saying, so it's a tax on things that you buy that came from other countries.
And usually there's a retaliation. Which means, as you're making your goods and services that you would sell to another country,
they're not going to put tariffs on
your
goods coming to their country.
Which again, and what the tax does, of course, is that it makes it more expensive to get that thing. And then what will happen is it often disincentivizes you from buying it, or at least at the very least, you can't buy as much of it as you would have because you've only got so much money.
Right.
And then the sort of the protectionist argument, and it's oftentimes kind of goes together with a kind of nationalism, is we want to incentivize, us making our own goods in our own country. And so the argument is we want to protect America. We want America, for example, to produce its own food. We want America to produce its own steel. We want America to produce its own cars. We want, all those kind of things so that we can be self-sufficient, so that we're not too dependent or very dependent at all upon foreign governments.
Yeah.
And so the protectionist argument is we slap some tariffs on these other goods because that makes those things more expensive, which then incentivizes developing those things here in this country.
Right.
So that we are self-sufficient. We depend on ourselves to produce things.
Which, by the way, is somewhat of a lie.
I'm just saying that's the argument.
But the lie is that we could be self-sufficient.
Right.
But we never have been.
Right.
We have been, no country.
Idaho cannot produce avocados.
Well, and that's the thing. That goes back to the sugar thing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that Gabe makes tennis shoes,
Right.
and I make T-shirts.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to try and make tennis shoes if he can do it better than me and more efficiently than I can.
Right.
I'm going to buy tennis shoes from him. He's going to buy T-shirts from me, and whoever can be the best at making that and most efficient,
Right.
create lower buying costs for themselves and cheaper prices for the person who's buying, they win.
Right.
And so we trade.
Right.
And one of the things that has been a blessing of America is that we've figured out that, and we import so much from other countries and have allowed for the rest of the world to grow and mature and to live in places they probably, even like big cities, we couldn't live in big cities unless we had the kind of trade system that we have.
Right.
Well, Bahnsen said this multiple times, like the free market, George Gilder, like the free market is a gift.
Absolutely.
Your work is a gift. Your products are a gift.
It is the gift of liberty, the ability to do what's good, right? Like that's what it's a gift of.
Yeah, and with that comes the gift of specialization.
Right.
So part of what happened in industrialization is that we got to the point where you didn't have to. So like, there's a real wooden kind of self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Which says, I want to be totally self-sufficient, which means you have to make your own shoes, your own clothes,
your own butter.
You have your own chickens, your own
flour,
butter,
tortilla.
your own, you have to raise your own cows, process their leather if you want leather, all metal. You have to have your own, if you want to be utterly self-sufficient, you have to produce everything that you need.
I come from that background.
and
it's still in me.
But Knox made that shit.
All my clothes are self-made.
Yeah, self-made.
Yeah.
But the thing is that like when you live that way, you're a subsistence living, meaning you barely survive.
Well, yeah, you're not really living that way either.
No, you can't.
Right.
Because you don't have the hours in the day.
You're gonna get your gas from somewhere.
Right.
You're gonna get your grain from somewhere.
Exactly. And so what happens in a virtuous and free society is very quickly, like, you think you've got a neighbor down the road and you're like, hey, how about you focus on the cows and I'll focus on the chickens.
Yeah.
Right.
You focus on the metal, I'll focus on the leather.
Yeah.
You focus on the on the textiles
Or the sugar.
and I'll focus on the wheat and the sugar. And then another neighbor springs up and he says, okay, how about this? You do wheat, I'll do sugar.
Right.
And then we'll trade at the harvest.
Right.
And you bring, you bring our metal tools. And whenever we get something broken, we go to you. But that's called specialization. And slowly but surely in the Industrial Revolution, that exploded.
Yeah.
And that's a gift. The gift is to be able to focus generally, more or less, on particular areas of service or goods
That you can be the most efficient at.
you can be at the most efficient at, because the more you can focus your work and your labor on one particular thing, the better you get at it, the more excellent you get at it. And it's just more efficient.
Yeah.
Because like whenever I have to like work on something, and my family, like my wife is like, oh no. Because I can't remember where I put my tools.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I have tools.
Oh, yeah.
I know I have this tool.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking in all the places, and I got my toolbox, and
Not
I got
efficient.
my drawers, and I'm like, where did I put that thing? And it's like, and I spend half the day trying to find the right tools.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it's like, I guess I got to buy a new one because I couldn't find one. And I finally find it. It's the wrong size. It's like, I don't do work like that regularly. I'm inefficient at it. But if you do that kind of work every day, you know where all your tools are, because that's, but I know where my computer is. I know where my commentaries are. I know,
Right.
I write sermons every week.
Right.
But
Well, even if you're good at that, like for me, I grew up doing construction and framing, and I had all the jobs.
Yeah.
So I'm usually good at everything I want to do. The problem is not all of them are as valuable to do.
right. That's the
Right?
other thing.
That's the other thing, right?
There's what economists call opportunity costs.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's opportunity costs in what you buy, but there's also opportunity costs in what you produce.
That's right.
You have resources to spend. You have time to spend. You have energy to spend. And you spend it on one thing. Well, there's only so many hours in the day.
That's right.
You can't then spend those same hours on something else.
That's right.
And so what you're trying to do, specialization, what it's trying to do is find the most valuable input for your time and energy and resources. And at the same time, when other people are doing that, and back to what real liberty is, real freedom is the ability to give the maximum, the ability to give your family and your neighbors and your people the maximum good. Well, then if more and more people are doing that, then what you're trading is blessing one another, because they're using their time and their resources to build and make things, and they bring that to market, and then you say, oh, but I need that, and I don't have time to make that.
That's why we call it goods and services.
I would love to have. I'd love to have that.
That's right.
But
I'm thinking about this conversation, and I bet some of our listeners are asking this question: why does this matter to the Bible? Why does this matter to me as a Christian? Why does this matter to me? Period.
Yeah. Well,
this discussion on tariffs.
Yeah. Well, what? Well, the question is so as policy, and back to the point that Knox said earlier, that there's a lie in the promise that you're actually protecting a nation with tariffs. I would say I think there's a place. It seems to me that there's a place for tariffs as a bargaining tool, and there's a place for tariffs as real penalties for some kind of injustice or lawlessness. Okay, which is what we've seen with
drugs,
fentanyl and illegal
stuff.
So yeah. I can see the argument there. It's like, because people are pushing down on scales, and the tariff is pushing it back down the other way.
Go ahead. Yeah.
But as far as just protectionist policy, we want to grow more sugar, and we don't like the fact that the people in the Bahamas can grow it a lot faster and a lot easier.
And cheaper.
I think that's terrible.
Yeah.
Because what that means is that people in America are laboring to do things that our country actually wasn't made to make as efficiently.
Yeah.
And what you end up doing is propping up something. And I know in the short term, you let the Bahama sugar in.
Yeah.
In the short term, that means that American sugar probably goes out of business slowly but surely. But you know what that does? That frees those people to do something more efficient and more effective, and be a better blessing, a bigger blessing to their neighbors. And that's where it matters, Gabe, is I would say.
And can I add that before you finish? Because this is part that gets missed. When I don't have to spend $10 more to buy your sugar, I have $10 now to spend more to do something else and create a whole nother economy.
Buy your wife Valentine's Day.
Right. So now you get a store that sells Valentine's Day gifts. And now I'm buying from you because I need a store that sells Valentine's Day gifts.
And what tariffs do is they're just taking money out of my pocket.
Yeah.
And stopping industry from naturally developing and flourishing like a wild force.
Right. And that's what protectionism does in general. Yeah. Protectionism in general isn't allowing the people the freedom to do good in the real world. All those things matter.
That's so good. That's a
freedom
good way to say it.
To do good in the real world. Because what a tariff does is it's making
It's a penalty.
It's a penalty, but it's creating a mirage. It's saying you can keep making sugar in this world, and it's a great good that you can do for your neighbors. Well, it's an okay good, but it's being propped up by the penalty that's being put on the Bahama sugar.
That's right.
And so it's not actually functioning in the real world. But the real world would be, look, we can make sugar really easy. And Americans be like, man, you can make sugar that easy? Well, then maybe I should make something else. Maybe there's something here in Louisiana that I can make that's far more efficient and a bigger blessing in the real world.
That's the line. So because of that, we forget that policy really does shape people. It really does. Yeah. And so when we make a policy that rewards things that are inefficient, it frames the mindset around it's okay to be inefficient.
Right.
Instead of framing the mindset around, oh, how can I be extremely efficient?
Right.
And the way that we see this is not just with taxes coming from other nations. When we have technologies that scare people in America, we do the same thing.
Right. I was thinking the same thing with AI stuff.
Well, the trucking industry, when it first came online, it was a train industry that was trying to stay alive.
Right.
And what did they do? They went to the government and asked for them to put taxes, making the trucking industry as inefficient as the train industry. While we had a more superior technology. So we framed our minds to say being efficient isn't valuable.
Right.
Protecting the industries that exist is more valuable than being efficient, which is not the way the world's made.
Right.
So I want to bring David Bahnsen's comments in on this.
Okay.
Because I think he brings in.
Agree with me, David. Please agree with me.
Cross your fingers.
I think he helps maybe also clarify some of the different kinds of tariffs.
Maybe distinguishing.
So let's roll this.
I talked to Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, at the start of the show, and I asked him, what do you think about tariffs? And he said, I've thought about this for many years, and the natural law does not speak to me on tariffs. He said Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, they were in favor of tariffs. And I kind of like the tariffs on China, but I'm a free trader generally. David, what do you think the president was doing last weekend?
Well, it's complicated because I want so badly to talk about tariffs as an economic matter, and President Trump is using them as a political matter to advance a domestic policy agenda. And so it becomes very complicated when we're talking about the effectiveness of getting concessions from Canada and Mexico around border security, drug trafficking, immigration, things in those categories, which is, of course, a separate category from the reality of tariffs as an impediment to trade.
Right.
So when we talk about tariffs here in the context of using them to protect American workers, I vehemently disagree. When we see things play out with Colombia, with what you saw on Monday with Mexico and Canada, which I hope yields some substantive fruit, I don't think the president is in this for a mere cosmetic victory, and I'm certainly not advocating for that. But if you get something substantive, that can be a positive thing. I just want people economically to understand, because I'm a nerd, and I can't be the political negotiating talent that Donald Trump is. I and my core want people to understand that tariffs are a tax that come at a cost, and therefore it's a trade-off. And you can think it's worth it, or you can think it's not worth it, but it does come at a cost.
You know, something else to think about is that we didn't feel any, because the tariffs really didn't take place.
Right.
So then we didn't feel anything that comes along with
because
it.
Trump said
There was no tariffs.
Although Trump, when he was talking about it, did say that it could. If these go through, he said it might be a little hard on us. Yeah, he actually did mention that.
This is why I think I talked to you about this as soon as Trump got elected. One of the things that Trump did was he immediately went to work telling the people who voted for him, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do.
Yes, he did.
And he started giving us all of the red meat we could handle.
Man.
I mean, he's still doing it. It's only been a three weeks now.
I'm so tired of it.
You see the tweet?
I'm not.
You see the tweet earlier this morning of the White House and the Oval Office? It's dark out. Early this morning, somebody took a picture of the White House, and there's a picture in the light, and the Oval Office is on, and they're saying he's already at work.
Wow.
See, and so
that kind of thing.
That's the thing, and I think he's doing it because he's making sure that our allegiance is going to be to him when it gets tough.
Yeah.
And if this thing happens with China, like it might, or with anybody else for that matter, he knows he's going to have the people who say, "Well, we trust you."
Right.
Do it. Get all the cancer out.
He's putting money in the bank, so that when it gets hard, he can say, "Guys, I think I earned your trust.
Right.
I can write this check.
Yeah.
Stay with me. Stick with me."
That's right.
I think that's really good. It's again, catch what Bahnsen said here, though. Bahnsen said there's a difference between tariffs
as a policy,
as a policy,
so important.
Which is, he says, it is just a tax, and that means with the tax there are trade-offs. He says what Trump's doing here, of course, is more a negotiating tool. He's been using it as a negotiating tool, which again is a distinction that I think is worth remembering.
The threat.
The threat. And given what they're doing illegally, what they're allowing to happen illegally to hurt our country, and as you noted at the beginning, Knox, that's affecting all our people.
Right. Yeah.
Not so much our business,
right,
as it is our people. That seems like a legitimate
direct effect.
Thing. But I think the thing that Bahnsen is getting at there, though, is that there's a different thing in terms of when we talk about it economically, we're talking about a tax. And it's just sort of like it's a different kind of tax. And with taxes, there's trade-offs, meaning you have that's money you don't have anymore.
You're right.
That the government has. And it's like, and is it worth it? Is it worth it? Now, one of the things that Trump's brought up in this whole conversation is the possibility of eliminating income taxes and reverting back to tariffs as the primary funding mechanism for the federal government.
He's got to show his work.
What's that?
He's got to show his work.
Yeah. But it's just a historical fact that until about the 1930s, the government was primarily funded by tariffs. The federal income tax amendment was passed. What year was that? I mean, that was maybe late 1800s or something like that. But it was not
federal income tax.
Yeah.
No, wasn't that originally only
19
assessed for time of war?
I don't know, but anyways, it's
because I think
it's an early 20th century
FDR.
amendment, and then but before that, the federal government was primarily funded by tariffs. There's a chart here that I sent over to the producers, where you can actually see the level of tariffs. This goes only back into the early 1900s. This particular chart, but notice how high.
1913 is when the income tax.
Okay, there you go.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so 1913 is when income tax was legalized. But
you remember what happens after that, don't you?
But
World War I.
I don't know which. But here's just to give you an idea of where we are right now with tariffs. I think this is an interesting chart. But early part of the century, you've got much higher tariffs. The dotted line on the top is all imports that have tariffs. So just tariffed imports, which is up to about up to 60% is the high point. And then the dark blue solid line underneath it is all imports together with those that have tariffs and those that don't.
Okay.
But again, regardless, you have high-ish tariffs going all the way up until about 1930. And that's
not a good time. Not a good time.
Yeah. And then dropping off dramatically after that. But in its place, and I don't have a chart to demonstrate this, but you have income taxes going up the other way.
Which started in 1913.
Yeah. So,
which I think is largely because of the growth of government.
And according to Google AI, the federal government collected around $2 trillion in income taxes, which is about 48% of the federal government's total revenue.
Interesting. Okay.
So what's your point?
Well,
my point.
So
the thing I was going to finish is what this particular chart is pointing out though is that there was 1929, the stock market crash,
right?
Yeah.
And
I wonder why.
Yeah, well, it was all kinds of reasons why.
Yes. Federal Reserve started,
but
they took all our gold.
Economists also point out though that initially, while there was a spike in unemployment, it wasn't as bad until the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was passed in 1930, a year later.
That's right.
And then unemployment, I think, doubled from that. And then what happened, though, was following that, basically everybody got a really bad taste in their mouth of tariffs. Because you think about this, you slap some of the most significant tariffs on imports right in a moment where there's economic crisis. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, now suddenly businesses, everything that they need costs way more. You've only got, it's trade-offs.
Yeah.
How do you want to spend your money?
Well,
and the businesses want to produce the goods, and so they got to lay people off because they can't pay for the people. They got to pay for the goods, and then there you are. And so you have this massive unemployment, and people got a really bad taste in their mouth. And that's actually when they started handing over the authority for tariffs to presidents. At this point, they stopped trusting Congress with tariffs, and they actually gradually handed the authority over. There's a series of acts in which the authority of tariffs has now been basically handed over to presidents.
Really?
And so that's why Trump is, actually
can do all this. Well, he's got the IEEPA Act that we just referenced to. Yeah.
But so that's kind of just history on all this. But the point I guess I'm overall wanting to make is just simply over the last 80 years, we have, or longer, 90 years, we have been relying heavily on income tax to fund the federal government. And at least one of the things that Trump is considering or suggesting we do is we consider going back to funding the federal government with tariffs. I would say that's, another question that's interesting, and it's a trade-off kind of question.
Oh, it's a trade-off.
What I think, David Bahnsen would be helpful to talk to about would be what are the factors in the trade-offs? Because right now...
Well, because Trump has hinted that he does want to get rid of the income tax and onboard tariffs to replace it.
There has to be, this is why I said he has to show his work earlier. Because if you decide to go tariffs, currently in our situation that we're at now, and we talked about Doge earlier, part of the success of what Trump is trying to do with tariffs is going to depend on how much he can cut out of the budget. Yeah. But currently where we sit at right now, at our budget, we would have to have tariffs that do 50 to 70% at least. And even doing that, they would only do like $750 billion
Do we know,
on a 50 to 70% tariff.
do we know what U.S. tariffs bring in right now?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know exactly what they bring in right now.
I'll Google it.
But I know at least the income tax is bringing in 2.2 trillion.
Right. Yeah.
So where's our producer at? But I know, here's what I do know. I know we ain't running much of American government or $780 billion.
Yeah, right.
But and if you did raise the tariff 50 to 70% tariffs on pretty much anything, you're going to have a retaliation from other nations. 50 to 70% on tariffs? What that does to the buying power?
Right now, the U.S. collected $77 billion in tariffs, which amounts to about 1.5% of all federal revenue.
So right
And
now,
that's in 2024.
1%. What did you say, Bree?
2024. Yeah, so
80
2024 was $77 billion.
So less than 2% of the federal government's total revenue.
So you got to get $2 trillion in tariffs to replace
So then
the income tax.
Unless
Trump's going for
that's my
unless you
point.
slash
This is my
the
point.
budget.
yeah,
You would have
which is
to
what Doge is doing.
radically, but this is
it's like-
this is the trade-offs. You have to Social Security gone, Medicaid, Medicare gone. I'm not mad at those things.
Right.
A lot more money in the American citizens' pocket, but how much more?
Right. Right. Because there's
But
Right.
don't forget
So,
the
but
other
think-
layer
but-
here,
and think about
Trump's
how-
negotiation thing.
and think-
he wants foreign businesses to actually build their manufacturers here.
I get that.
That's one of his negotiating things
But
in all this.
I'm talking about a mentality of a people that have been dependent so much on the federal government.
That's right.
When you do something like this, you have a massive, massive shift in everything. Right? We're just talking about U.S. aid right now, and everybody is flipping out.
It's true.
Flipping out off of one institution.
And U.S. aid, I think, is 0.5%.
Right. Right.
Oh my goodness!
Right. So
Yeah.
we have to, and I'm not
That's a good
mad.
point.
I'm not
Yeah.
mad at the play. This is why whatever's going to happen, you have to massively reduce government so much that the individual becomes self-governing again, which I'm not mad at this possibility.
Right.
I want that.
Right.
But boy, this is a
Are you ready for that kind of freedom?
I am ready for that kind of freedom. I don't know at the pace in which we're talking about over the next 4 years.
This goes back to my original question before we ran the Bahnsen video. Was as a Christian, why does this matter to me?
Right. Because you want to be free. And
Do I want to be free from tariffs or income tax or
Yeah.
Yes.
not at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
You want to have maximum responsibility and authority
Yeah.
over your
Property.
work, your time, your
Yeah.
family,
Your budget.
your work, all of it.
Yeah.
You own it.
That's right.
And you're responsible before God for it to turn a profit on it.
That's right.
Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Take dominion.
Yeah.
Right. But what happens is a slave mentality that creeps in is we don't even know. We do not have access to enormous portions of what God's given us. We're being mugged constantly.
Yeah, I mean, we're I know.
I mean, between
I'm taxed at probably 35%
between income tax
And then
and
that's not-
state tax,
grocery tax,
property
gas
tax,
property tax.
I mean, inheritance tax. I
Yeah.
mean, gains
Death
tax.
tax.
Breathing tax.
Yeah, I mean, all of
Yeah.
it. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think people realize. And then there's a whole bunch of unseen taxes that you don't even know.
That's right.
Like, we're paying the costs of. I mean, you said gas tax. Most people don't know.
Yeah.
There's like a bunch of money in that gas. Like, you just see the price and you're like, I hope that gas price goes down. But it's like you're paying that price because of taxes.
Yeah, depending on your state, it's like 40 cents a gallon.
Right.
And 20 cents usually goes to the state, 20 cents goes to the feds. It depends on the state. It's there are lots, I mean, at least, $80 billion in revenue already going to the government on tariffs. Yeah.
Which means that there's cost of products and goods that we buy.
Yeah.
It's higher because of those taxes. So I mean, there's all these taxes already in place.
Well, and what you're also getting at also is kind of just equal justice, equal weights and measures.
Right.
Well,
That
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
even-
that's
that
yeah.
Are hidden to us.
Yeah, we don't even know.
Well, yeah, we think that the government is supposed to be an entity in between trade. Right. They're not. If me and Toby do something, they don't have anything to say about how much I need to charge him.
Yeah.
This goes with price control too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This all comes all into this.
Minimum wage laws.
That's exactly right.
Overtime pay laws. I mean, all these things, or price controls, price ceilings.
Yes.
Price floors.
That's right.
These are the things where the government says you cannot charge more than this for your product. price may not drop below this amount, and if it does, we will pay
minimum wage.
All these things.
Yeah, they get to tell you what your property is worth.
But all of that means that to the extent that you cannot use your time the way that you want to use it,
that's right.
To the extent that you cannot make a deal with a neighbor freely without the government getting in there and saying it has to be for this much and that much and that much, and here's the taxes that you're going to owe if you do that. To that extent, we are not free, and to that extent, we do not have authority.
That's right.
And responsibility for our labor, for our property.
We're just scratching the surface on this.
Right.
I mean, I was just kind of thinking about. I mean, it's like we need massive economic repentance.
Yeah. Yes.
Like we think about repenting of sexual sin in our nation, Epstein files, whatever.
Right.
But we need a whole. Like we need to discover this. I guess part of that's one of the reasons why I'm grateful for Doge, because I knew the government's been stealing our money for ever. I don't trust any and almost half the budgets that they have. I don't trust how they spend our money, all that stuff. And Doge is just, what you said, 0.5%. Doge is just like scratching the surface with what's going on.
Yeah.
And we need like massive economic repentance. And I think a lot of this has actually just come from, Christians just standing by. Christians standing by on the economy. It is what it is. We just we give our money and they spend it how it is. We might not like it all.
But I think the more and more you become self-sufficient, you decide to take responsibility for the areas that you have authority over, you begin to see this on a very local level. Pastor Toby, I remember you talking about this, and years ago, it hit me kind of stark. It was like, I already pay for my kids to go to the school that I want them to go to, and the government is taking money from me to send somebody else's kids to school who I don't know, and they're making me pay for it. I didn't sign up for. That's not what I agreed to, and yet I'm paying out twice. Wait a second, that got to end. When you start taking responsibility for something as simple as your kid's education, you start seeing all of a sudden, oh man,
I'm paying for public school
should have had money for this,
That's right.
But I have less money because I'm paying twice, or maybe triple. Who knows how much I'm paying? Or the simple things like that, taking care of your mother and your father. When you start doing that and you start seeing that there's other money that's been taken from your check to take care of something, and you're like, wait a second, I should have money for this. Why don't I have money for this? Oh, they've been taking money out for me and giving it to somebody else's parents.
Yeah.
Like I would like to take care of my own.
Right.
When you start doing those things, all of a sudden you wake up and say, oh, I need the money that I make to go towards the things that God has given me authority over to take care of.
And it's being stolen from
But
me.
when you don't do that, you don't see it.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see it at all.
right.
And so it takes you being free in one area to be able to be free in all of them.
And the thing is that God has made us to be the best stewards of what he's given us.
Yeah.
And so when we take responsibility for what he's given us to the best of our ability, we're in a position to make the adjustments that we need to make. Adjustments of efficiency,
that's right.
time spent. This is personal discipline. All these kind of things.
Yeah.
But if the money's just taken from you because the government is going to make sure your grandparents are taken care of, the money's taken from you to make sure that there's human rights and humanitarian things. It's absolutely inefficient, and you can't make adjustments.
Well, and it makes me think like the worst kind of slave is a rich slave.
Right.
That's America.
Well, that's
us. The rich kind of slave is a wealthy slave, which is all of us here in America.
Exactly.
No, because we aren't pushing back on this.
There's a lot of people who hear this kind of stuff and be like, yeah, but I still got Netflix.
Yeah. I got my car
in my prison cell.
I got my house. This is the worst kind of slave.
I got my car. I'm living pretty comfortable. It's like, but so we don't even know what it would be like to be free.
Yeah, that's right.
And I literally basically mean what if your income was nearly double?
Right.
When you're being taxed at 40%, which a lot of us are close to that, and maybe more because we don't even calculate in our normal taxes the gas tax, the sales tax, and all that stuff.
What would you think of that? What would you think of your income just being doubled? Now, you could do that, and now you're responsible for it all.
Right.
Not the government.
Your mom and dad.
You're going to take care of your mom and dad and your grandparents.
Your medical care.
And if some emergency hits, it's on you.
All on you.
Your extended family or your neighbors or your church community. But you think about what kind of, back to the opportunity cost in the real world. If you actually had access to what God has given you, your resources, the money that you actually make, and it's not being parsed out constantly, what kind of business would you make?
That's right.
What kind of school would you start?
Yeah.
What kind of building could your church build?
What things
What
are
kind
you
of house
efficient
could
at?
you buy?
Right. All these, like, how could you serve your community better? It would allow you to specialize, use those resources, invest in things that you believe in and things that you think are efficient and crucial. And when everybody was doing that, it would be a lot more efficient, a lot more fruitful in your community and throughout the world. It's a better world when you're free in that way.
That's
now,
right.
heavy responsibility,
heavy
weight.
much is given, much is required.
So much is given, much is required. But that's a freer world.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you a bunch of kids. And if you have those kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross